This video is about reasons why you may not want to become a consulting arborist. And I'm going to divide into two sections. The first one being the more serious ones, that you should reconsider the career path if these things apply to you. And the second one is things that would make your life harder if you were to become a consulting arborist. They're not going to be in any particular order within the sections. So the first section is the stuff that's much more important and fundamental to the practice of consulting. Number one, if you don't like people, consulting is a lot of client work. Once you progress a little bit in your career, you handle a lot of projects on your own, so you're the one interfacing with clients. There's a different level of professionalism that you have to commit to, and that can be hard, and that will be hard if you just don't want to deal with people. This applies not just to interacting with homeowners like you might on a tree crew, but also engineers, architects, developers, just a much wider range of people. The second one is if you are not a good writer and you don't see a way for you to improve. It's fine if you don't like writing. I don't love writing. It gets really tedious even for me, but I know that I'm a good writer, and that makes this career path a little bit more of a shoe-in. So if you're not good at writing and you don't think that you will have the patience to learn how to write well, and no one can teach you that. You have to have a personal drive. You gotta read, that's one way of becoming a good writer, to read a lot. If you're not willing to put in that work, then this is not going to be a great outcome. If you don't like being in an office, this is not the job for you. Consulting is a lot of indoor work. It depends on what kind of consulting you do, of course, but the more advanced you get, it's just more and more office time. I don't have exact numbers, but I would say I'm at least 50% in the office, if not more like 60%. The next thing is if you are not tech savvy and you are, again, not willing to put in the work to get better at it, at least be familiar and capable with basic programs like PDF software and making edits on photo editors, things like that, and being able to navigate Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel. But if you don't know the basics of those things and you can't write up a document yourself, you're going to have a steep upward slope. If you don't have the basic skills and you're on the older side, meaning that maybe you don't pick things up as quickly because you're not used to it, then it will get more difficult. If you are someone who doesn't like to read, that is going to be a problem. There's a lot of information out there these days in the form of podcasts and videos, but some of the most fundamental knowledge is going to be in the books, in the references that get published in the industry, in textbooks. If you're just really bad at reading or you hate it, you're going to be limited in the information that you're going to be able to get. The next point is if you are not a detail-oriented person, or if you're not precise in the way you get and dispense information. There is a lot of consulting that's like forensics, and that's the fun part of it. I'm not saying forensics in a legal sense, but problem solving, detective work, depending on what kind of work you do, it just gets more and more advanced. So you have to be super precise. You have to be able to once again, read things in a lot of detail, remember them, be really good at taking notes, and be able to distill it together and then produce a product that synthesizes all that information. When I look at when I'm working on a construction project and I have to look at plans, sometimes those plans can be more than 30 pages long if they send you everything. But even if they don't, if they just send you a site plan or a landscape plan, just a couple of sheets, there is so much information on those sheets, and you need to be able to read through everything, evaluate whether this information is necessary or not, and then keep track of the stuff that is actually relevant. If you're not the type of person who is able to have that focus, then it will be difficult because you'll miss details that might come back and bite you later. It's not just about, oh, I didn't see that. You can't make excuses like that. You have to be a professional. And if you're not precise in what you write, if you're just broadly summarizing something and people understand it in a way that you didn't mean it, then that is also potentially also going to get you into trouble because you've put this information down in writing, and someone can argue the point against you. So to some extent, that can also be like a professional negligence. The next thing is, if you're someone who doesn't want to get credentials. I know a few arborists like this. They don't want to get the arborist credential. They don't want to get tree risk assessor. They don't want to do this or that. But if you're resistant to actually getting them because you don't want to give these organizations your money, you don't want to have to maintain them, then that will work against you, because you get more credibility the more qualifications or certifications you have. As unfortunate as that might be, that's really the case. And I have been selected over other people because of some of my credentials, and other people have been selected over me because of the credentials that I lacked. And the last thing would be under this absolute section is if you have physical incapabilities where you cannot walk or move around for long periods of time. I think that there is some flexibility with this if you can select jobs or take a lot of breaks in between. But sometimes I'm on my feet in difficult terrain for 8 hours. There's terrain that sometimes you have to saddle up and make sure that you're hooked onto a tree so that you don't tumble down the slope. There's times where, even for me, I have difficulty because I'm not physically heavy enough getting through like woody brush. Depending on what issues you have physically, you may not actually be able to do the fieldwork portion. Now, this is the second section of things that aren't gonna prevent you from being a consulting arborist, but it'll definitely make it more challenging. And a lot of this is more emotional, I think. So again, no particular order. One is if you feel strongly about fairness and justice. I'm not sure why I wrote it like that, but let's say if it bothers you that things don't go the way that they should, like bad people get away with things. Let's say you're looking at this tree that's really amazing. The neighbor hacked it and the client is super upset because of this situation. There's a good chance that there is no justice coming along. In issues like neighbor conflicts, people will ask me for stuff like value loss or tree damages, and I'm willing to do it, but I also let them know that just giving you this number is not going to fix the problem. One, the tree is screwed up in some kind of way, but two, unless they're planning on suing their neighbor, sometimes there's no resolution, and that can drag on you if you're someone who sees bad tree work and gets really aggravated by it. You see people getting taken advantage of, and that aggravates you. It will add up over time. When someone is at the point of hiring a consulting arborist, sometimes it gets a lot more serious, and it is human nature to want to be able to do good for other people and to be invested in the results. But sometimes you don't hear back, sometimes things don't go well, and that's part of the job. I, again, have not done litigation work myself, but I've heard from other arborists who do it that ultimately is not about how much you know and how good you are as an arborist. That doesn't necessarily affect the outcome of the case. So if you go into some litigation work thinking that as an expert witness I'm going to help my client win this, there's a lot of other factors that affect how the case is settled or how the outcome is determined, and it can be disappointing, or it will be disappointing if you have these expectations that as a good arborist I'm gonna be able to help them win. Another thing that might make you uncomfortable with consulting is if you can't tolerate the unknown. it's very tempting to want to have resources that say, if you do this, if you stay this far away from these particular species during construction, you can save them. If you prune off this much of a tree, it will tolerate that. If you cut this many roots, that tree will not fall over. It is very common to want all that information, especially when you're starting out. But the reality is that information either doesn't exist or it's anecdotal. No one's going around testing trees in all different situations in a rigorously scientific manner to come up with data like this. So it's ultimately based on what other arborists have seen and just their general feel about how trees behave in certain settings. Like, those are all, in some cases, just educated guesses. Educated and experienced guesses. In the same vein, if you're someone who tends to be anxious, the nature of the work itself can lend itself to certain anxieties, because your recommendations can directly affect people's lives. So if you evaluate a tree and determine that the risk of this tree falling over is low, and the tree falls over and hurts someone or kills someone, that kind of decision will weigh heavily on you. It's going to weigh heavily on people anyway, but if that just sounds like you couldn't do the job knowing that that could happen, then this is not the career. You have to do your due diligence so that you don't come out the other side as being negligent. And over time, I think you just build with that knowledge and that experience a little bit more certainty, but there is always uncertainty. It doesn't really go away. You just tolerate it a little bit better. Another thing is, if you are idealistic about the job, being a consulting arborist sounds good, right? You're teaching people about trees. You're gonna help people preserve trees, stuff like that. It doesn't normally play out that way, especially if you work in development, if you do construction related work. Let's just say it's the opposite. You will see areas that were previously wooded and forested get clear cut for development. You will see really, really nice, interesting trees get cut down because the homeowner, the property owner, doesn't like them. I think that most of my work now is more like making a list of all the trees that will get removed because someone wants to put a building there or something like that. And there are times where you can help people preserve trees. That feels really good, but I think that I condemn far more trees than I actually preserve. And I'm not condemning them because of their condition. You gotta stay objective and just look at, the plan being that they're going to build this building here, and you can't save the tree because they're going to cut off all the roots or something like that. And I think that is very common for new consulting arborists to be surprised that that's what they end up doing a lot if they're doing construction related projects. Of course, if you are pro development and you just want to see everything get developed, you're going to have a different experience. But it seems to be a fairly common experience to become disillusioned a little bit and to feel like this was not what you expected. Another thing is, if you don't like networking and sharing information and collaborating with other people, like I said, there's a lot of anecdotal information out there that's not recorded in books, that's not shared on forums. For a lot of consulting arborists, even if they work in a company with a bunch of other consulting arborists, the job itself can be lonely. There's 50-60% of your time that you're just writing reports, or maybe you're reviewing someone else's work. Like, that's all solo time. the more you can get in the habit of doing this kind of networking, if you ever went off on your own, you will already have had this established social circles, people that you can learn from and people that you can talk to about certain things that you're running into. The collaboration aspect is not just with other arborists, it's working in a team with other people. So if you're doing legal work, then there's attorneys, there's other experts. If you're doing construction related work, there's everyone on the design team. Related to that, if you're someone who expects that your recommendations will be followed and that people will listen to you, that can be a huge disappointment. This applies both to homeowners and also different teams. So on the homeowner level, you can tell people, hey, this tree, your tree is declining. If you want to save it, water it, do this. Chances are when you go back, they haven't done it or they're not doing it properly. With something like a construction project, you could give recommendations to have them do XYZ around the tree and to save it, but people don't necessarily listen because they want something more than that tree. I was involved in this project where initially the developer was very much listening to my recommendations. They had preserved this excellent oak, one of the best ones I've seen in an urban environment, but that tree is gone now. They changed their plans a few iterations in and they got rid of it. So very disappointing. Easy to get discouraged if you're not emotionally strong about it. If you are someone who tends to be biased or your opinion will change because your client wants something, then that will be difficult. Being a consultant means that you are offering an independent, objective opinion that should not be swayed by the person hiring you or your personal values for that matter. If you're going to change your opinion just because someone wants you to, eventually people figure that out. Cities, if you're submitting reports to them, they can figure that out. Other arborists can figure it out. And sure, you'll attract people who are shady, but ultimately you might run into situations that get you in trouble because you've said certain things that are untrue, and other arborists with different opinions that can be much more supported, they come in and they expose your lies, basically expose your bias. And the last thing, finally, my last point is, if you are someone who is not disciplined enough to keep deadlines on your own time, that will make the job challenging as well. The nature of the job is that things get put on hold a lot. If you're waiting for information to complete some sort of report, even if you plan your schedule out perfectly and you have yourself doing office work, writing all these different reports at a certain time, things don't always work out that way because you're dealing with other people. Maybe you don't get what you need. Maybe you sent off emails, someone responded, but they didn't respond to everything you needed. You have to further delay it, and that starts rolling into other projects. So if you don't have the discipline to adjust your schedule accordingly and to keep those deadlines, that can be problematic in the face of big clients with serious deadlines. When someone hires you and you have a contract, you have to keep the terms of that contract, which includes delivering the final product, the reports, by a certain time. For a homeowner, maybe they don't have as much leverage against you, but for a big developer or a big company, that's a serious contract. If you don't do things on time, that's non-compliance, that's violating the contract. And if you don't perform, you could lose that contract, you could get sued. There's actual consequences for this. On a less explicit level, it's your reputation that's going to shit if people know that Jennifer is going to say certain things and she's not going to deliver. that is a terrible look to have, and eventually they're gonna move on to find someone else who's more reliable if they have that option. Even though I have this list of like, even though I had this list of like, be tech savvy, be a good writer, be impartial, blah blah blah. The reality is that there are a lot of arborists who meet these, who are like this, who don't meet their deadlines, who say whatever the client wants them to say. And the truth is that they do make money, but it depends on what kind of a consultant you want to be. To me, at least, I want to be the arborist that people move on to and stay with because I can deliver what they want in a reliable way and just be very professional and predictable.